Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, the EPA issues final rules for reducing emissions from the Navajo Generating Station. And we'll learn about a long-term plan to bolster Arizona's global competitiveness. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency yesterday issued new rules to reduce emissions from the Navajo Generating Station. The new rules incorporate recommendations from a technical working group made up of stakeholders and the power plant's owner-operators. Sandy Barr is director of the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club, which is not on board with the new rules. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Before we get to your concerns here, what exactly did the EPA decide yesterday?
Well, basically what the EPA did is, instead of going with the proposal that it came out with, which is the proposal that met the Clean Air Act requirements, the EPA has chosen to go with a proposal submitted by this technical working group, which includes Salt River Project. And they basically have said they're going with a proposal that allows significant delay in cleaning up Navajo Generating Station.
Did they explain why the delay was a better option?
Well, there is it's a long decision, and they explained a little bit, but in some areas they didn't give much explanation at all, which is unfortunate. But overall, they're saying because the plant is on tribal land, they can give it a special exception. That's one of the reasons that they gave. They argue that it is better than what they proposed, but that's a pretty convoluted argument, especially if you look at the technical work group proposal. There's really no certainty with it. There's not a clear path to compliance, which is one of the things that we've raised repeatedly. Basically, under the proposal that EPA came out with originally, within 5 years, they would have to clean up the plant. Under this, they can just keep running the way they are and push it out till 2029. And then if they're at their limit or over, they would have an interim shutdown and then could potentially start operating again, provided they actually did shut down. So the only thing in it that there are these caps on the pollution that kick in 2029, and then in 2044 the plant would close provided the Navajo Nation didn't acquire it.
But I thought that the plan calls for closing one of those 3 generating stations by 2020, or at least reducing the equivalent amount of power that would equate to closing one of those plants. Is that not in the plan?
It's one of the alternatives, one of the scenarios included. But again, there's no enforceability of emissions reductions on a year-to-year basis. The only thing that is enforceable are these the reports. They have to report on emissions, so they have to provide the information. And then when they get out to the 2029, if they've exceeded this interim cap, then potentially EPA could say, well, you have to shut down.
And again, at the 2029, the idea is that nitrous oxide emissions will be cut by 80% by 2030. So what you're saying is, if they don't hit that 80%, you're concerned that the enforcement measures that have been talked about aren't strong enough to keep some sort of interim plan, or hey, we can't make this, we got to figure out plan B, plan C, these sorts of things?
Well, first of all, we don't know what this proposal will do. I mean, it's intended to protect the air around Grand Canyon and 10 other national parks and monuments. And obviously, in reducing nitrogen oxide emissions, it also helps protect public health. So by allowing them to pollute for a couple more decades, potentially, they're continuing to affect these national treasures as well as affecting public health. And again, they could exceed it and and just keep running it and then do a shutdown, which is going to be bad for everyone, bad for the tribes, bad for public health, and certainly harmful to Grand Canyon and other places.
It sounds like, and again, this was the result of 5 years of talks with environmental groups, with the tribes, with the stakeholders, as we mentioned. It sounds like the goal, though, was to cut pollution and also kind of take your time doing it so that you don't lose too many jobs up there in northern Arizona. It's a compromise, and it sounds like the Sierra Club's not happy with the compromise, but if all these people are at the table talking about this for 5 years, is it as good as you could have hoped for?
No, not at all. They could have done much better. A compromise means you still get to complying with the Clean Air Act. A compromise would mean the people who are breathing the pollution from this plant are not continuing to breathe the large harmful amounts that are coming out of it. I mean, we're talking about one of the top 10 polluters in the country, certainly the biggest polluter in the region. This, it's a big deal, and they ought to be complying with the Clean Air Act. This is something that has been around for a long time. This is not a new provision in the Clean Air Act. It's not like Congress just passed this a couple years ago and we're saying, oh, you have to do this right away. They had 20 years to reduce emissions, to comply with this, and now they want to stretch it out a couple more decades. That's just unacceptable. That's not a good compromise.
As far as the retrofitting, though, and equating to the Clean Air Act and getting that in line, EPA even recognized that the threat of the plant closing down and the effect it would have on CAP, on jobs in northern Arizona, the whole 9 yards, was enough for them to consider this particular compromise. Again, can you at least see where they're coming from on that?
Well, I can understand that they want to look at all of the issues and should, and so did we. But this proposal allows the plant to continue to pollute for a much longer period of time, and it harms people in the region. Starting now to look at a transition plan would be appropriate. How is it going to be helpful to people who work there if they run this dirty plant up until 2029 and then say, okay, we're shutting it down? That doesn't help anyone. So we really think that they need to implement the Clean Air Act, clean it up, work for promoting clean energy throughout Arizona. I mean, that's something that we have been working on for decades. We're big supporters of renewable energy efficiency programs, and those are programs that can provide good jobs that are more sustainable and that don't create the same kind of health problems that we see from this coal plant.
EPA said that over time there will be a 72% improvement haze at the Grand Canyon. Again, this is over time, it's only 72%. I know it's not 80% or 90%, but is it good enough at least for a plan, at least to get started? While we could be talking about developments here in the next decade or so that could make this whole thing obsolete, couldn't we?
Well, you could argue that the coal plant is obsolete. I mean, that's why Nevada Energy and LA they're getting out of the plant. They're not investing in coal. Coal is a high risk, and so you're seeing states and you're seeing individual companies get out of coal generation. It really is an old technology. That plant is one of the biggest polluters, and really delaying the action on it and allowing it to continue to pollute, that just means that we're subsidizing water with more pollution, and we shouldn't be subsidizing Central Arizona Project with dirty air. That's just wrong.
Last question: is a lawsuit likely, you believe, to block implementation of this?
We don't know. We're looking at it right now, but we believe strongly that the Environmental Protection Agency has a responsibility to uphold the Clean Air Act, a responsibility to all Americans to protect Grand Canyon and these 10 other parks and wilderness areas.
All right. It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
And we should mention that tomorrow we will hear from members of the technical working group that successfully put together this plan to reduce emissions at the Navajo Generating Station. Tonight's edition of Arizona's Future looks at the state's path to global market expansion by way of a strategic roadmap created by Arizona's Transportation and Trade Corridor Alliance. Here to talk about the goal of better connecting Arizona to the global economy is State Department of Transportation Director John Halikowski, Margie Emmerman, the Executive Director of the Arizona-Mexico Commission, and Sandra Watson, President and CEO of the Arizona Commerce Authority. It's good to have you all here. I'm excited about this because I love this this is futuristic, this is looking toward the future and doing good things, but the idea of behind developing this roadmap, where did all this get started?
Well, Ted, I think it's safe to say that Margie and Sandra and I have been talking about this for years. Margie and I, in fact, go all the way back to 1990, I would say, in the Symington days. But more importantly, Governor Brewer in 2012 recognized that there's a unique confluence in Arizona based on our geographic location between international and national markets, and the fact that you need international relationships, you need trade and investment, and you also need the transportation infrastructure to tie it together.
And we have always needed this, but this roadmap really sets out ideas, goals, and recommendations. Have we been a little slacking on this over the years?
You know, I don't know that we've been slacking, but what we haven't done is aligned as well as we're doing through this roadmap. When you get the Commerce Authority, the Department of Transportation, and although the Arizona-Mexico Commission has a relationship with Mexico, it ties in nicely because it says we're about global economies. And I think that alignment is what is strategically important. In addition to all of the great information you have here, if you don't bring everybody together and leverage and maximize our opportunities, that's where perhaps we've lost a little bit.
The goal of growing value-added industries, what does that mean?
Well, the Arizona Commerce Authority was actually established, as you know, to strengthen Arizona's economy through quality job creation. Our focus is to work with companies who are export-driven, base industries that are creating more value back and bringing more value back to the state. So when we look at the industries of the future and we look at the opportunities that Arizona has in working, obviously, as Margie and John said, in a global environment, it's really absolutely critical that we look at those industries that have the opportunity to bring more wealth back to the state and create more jobs.
So basically the made here, sold there idea on steroids?
Yes, correct.
Absolutely.
Okay, if it's made here and sold there, how do we get it there?
Well, that's an interesting point because you hear a lot of folks saying we want to double international trade, and one of our key goals in this report is to double international trade by 2025. Obviously, in order to move raw goods in and finished products out, or in some cases, as goods and materials passed 5 or 6 times through our international border with Mexico before you have a finished product, it's very important that you have a good transportation infrastructure to enable your key industries to compete.
And to get that good transportation infrastructure, what do we need to do? What are the biggest challenges right now?
I think that Arizona really needs to focus on what we call key commerce corridors. If you take a look at the maps, it's very obvious to us that we have connections to key markets, not only in California and Texas, but to our 2 biggest international trading partners, Mexico and Canada, respectively. So if you take a look at where we are in Arizona, we have those connections between the ports in Long Beach and LA and California to the west of us, which gives us the international connection. You have I-19 and I-10 to the south of us, which give us connection to Mexico, and then 10 to the east going into Texas. And let's not forget the all-important I-17, because we don't just live for industry here, we also live for tourism, and 17 takes our residents up north.
And again, you mentioned Texas and California, Mexico, obviously. Arizona's geography. Are we sitting on a gold mine here? Are we sitting on an opportunity here that we just haven't taken advantage of, considering those markets?
Well, when you consider that if you look at where we sit, I mean, we're a gateway, and with the explosive growth that Mexico is going to have, we have the opportunity to be really a platform for people to come into the region, do manufacturing, do a lot of value-added services, and we can be a platform for North America for people coming into our region. We now have the infrastructure at our ports of entry. We have a plan. We have everything ready to go out and market. That's what this is all about. We need to start marketing the greatness that Arizona has.
But it's not just Mexico. Let's face it, California, in that San Diego basin area, you've got over 16 million consumers and $1 trillion plus GDP, which I think speaks to what Sandra is trying to do with California.
Absolutely, no question. And we have 2 offices now in California, and we are connecting our business communities. So making sure that there are opportunities for Arizona businesses in California, but also opportunities for California businesses here in Arizona. But as we start talking about our strategic proximity to these world markets, and if we think about California, and California is the 9th largest economy in the world. Mexico is the 14th largest economy in the world, tied with Texas as the 14th.
But Mexico going to be the 8th
Right,
largest
which will
economy
be-
by
Yeah.
2050. I have to
14
throw
with
that
a
in.
bullet, right?
Right, which is rapidly growing. And so when you look at Arizona's strategic position among these world economies, there's tremendous opportunity. And that really is what the goal of this roadmap was. Again, as Margie and John talked about, the alignment piece is critical. The infrastructure piece has to be there if we're going to move services, goods and services and people. But when we look at those markets and we look at what the advantages Arizona currently offers, we are ranked in the top 5 for aerospace and defense. We are ranked in the top 5 for semiconductors. We have a national 7th, we're ranked 7th as far as technology related industries. So we have tremendous assets available to us here in Arizona. And when we position Arizona in these world markets, we have some critical advantages that other markets don't have.
When you,
That's the important piece.
Please.
Right
We
there.
need to start really marketing ourselves, leveraging the assets, marketing our opportunities, and really telling the world what Arizona is about. And that's, I think, what all of this brought together and brought to mind. We've got so much to market.
you got so much to market when you've talked about aligning policy and action, but how do you get stakeholders, how do you get the decision makers on the same page? I know it's like herding cats to a degree, but it's time. I mean, the world is passing us by. We can't sit around and wait for this much longer.
Exactly. And I think that raises another very excellent point, is how do you bring stakeholders to the table? How do you get alignment? And so we've done a couple of things. We've looked to other states. We've looked at Texas and how they've achieved alignment, because if you go to Texas, people there believe that infrastructure and trade and the economy all go together, and investment in infrastructure to boost that economy is a good thing to do. So what we've been doing for the past 3 years is we've been sitting down with a lot of our business folk. ADOT has visited over 300 business owners in the past 3 years. We're also sitting down with folks like the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce. We're involved in a lot of different ways with different organizations to say, look, here are the maps, and it's pretty easy to see where Arizona is located. You have big cities to the west of us, you have big cities to the east of us, huge trading partners to the north and south of us. Essentially, you don't have that confluence anywhere else in the country, except if you look perhaps at Chicago and New York as 2 other large cities. So you have a huge market here where we sit in the middle of.
And I asked this question before, but let me ask it in a different way. Has Arizona missed the opportunity to get on, latch on to these changes in the global landscape? Because this all makes sense, but this would have made sense 5 years ago. This would have made sense 10 years ago. How do you make sure we're not in 5 years saying, you know, this makes sense, we should have done this 5 years? I mean, how do you get people on board here and you know, start doing some action instead of all the talking?
Well, I don't want to talk about what happened in the past. What we want to talk about is what we're going to do in the future, and that's what this roadmap is about. You're right, Ted. We need to start really getting our opinion leaders, our elected officials, our people at a county level, at a city level, at every level, to start all talking from the same page. And that's why we put this roadmap together, so that people understand, in order for us to be competitive, this is what it's going to take.
Well, and the other piece to add to that is, during this process, it gave us an opportunity to engage a greater number of people that are very interested in advancing Arizona. So we held focus group discussions, we had hearings, we went across the state, we heard from business leaders, we heard from community leaders, we had the economic development groups involved in this discussion, we had obviously transportation infrastructure, and so this has become a shared responsibility. We're bringing the public sector and the private sector together with academia, and so if you look through the report, you'll see that a number of key leaders, both on the community side and the business, have really come together and have decided that it is a tremendous opportunity for Arizona to begin to have this discussion about global competition. It is fierce competition out there, as we know. Lots of states are involved, talking about how to better their states and their communities. We're talking about opportunities where we connect with other markets. We have this strong relationship, obviously, with Mexico. Margie and her team have been doing some excellent work in making sure that those relationships are there. We've got opportunities in Mexico and working with the business community. I know that John and his team have been talking to the folks in Mexico as well. Canada is a huge market for us. We have actually connected with a number of the business and community leaders both in Canada as well as here in Arizona. There's a tremendous business community here in Arizona that really do represent Canadian interests, and we've been working with them. And so if we start to really capitalize on those strategic opportunities, we can advance Arizona at a much more rapid pace than
The other thing I would say is that this report doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's not a final version. In other words, it's a dynamic report that we're going to keep adding to. But this will eventually feed up into work that Sandra's doing with Morrison Institute, I believe, into a larger report and call to action for the state. So this is a key piece of a larger piece that we're working on.
So if I'm a decision maker, if I'm a lawmaker, and you hand me the report, what do you tell me? What do you want to emphasize in there? What should I need to know?
You need to know that Arizona has a lot of opportunities, but there are going to need to be some decisions made, in some very thoughtfully crafted decisions about where good investments need to happen in the state of Arizona. Things like key commerce corridors and things that are going to need to be decisions that we all need to come together to make.
So it's an interesting question when you talk about lawmakers. And earlier you had flashed the bubble map up there. And in the last legislative session, I presented to a joint House Senate Transportation Committee. And one of the things we said to them is, look where Arizona sits, and what those orange bubbles represent are the relative GDP of those areas. So if you look at the gross domestic product of where we're at, it makes a lot of sense to take our 1970s interstate system and begin to upgrade not just the interstates, but also look at other modes, whether that's rail, air. All of this fits together in a logistics picture that we need to get focused on, because trade is not just among us here in Arizona, it's not even with other states. It's been pointed out, we're now in global competition.
That's right. We've got about 30 seconds left. Are those decision makers listening?
I believe so. I believe that, as I said, as we've talked about earlier, this is a shared responsibility and a shared commitment, and the dialogue has started, and we hope to continue that dialogue moving forward.
Well, very good. It's good to have you all here. We got to stop right there. It's an encouraging report, and we won't look too far back into the past. But we got to learn some lesson. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on Arizona Horizon, hear from those who are satisfied with the new EPA rules on emissions from the Navajo Generating Station, and we'll talk about the future of job growth in Arizona. That's tomorrow evening at 5:30 and 10, right here on Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.